Hello and welcome to Channel's Book Club. I'm Olakunle Kasumo. The history of Nigeria is intricately woven within the history of its army, for it was the army that first truncated the country's young democracy in 1966 and then went on to determine its political course over the next decades. Anyone with average knowledge of those early military events that changed the direction of the young independent country back in the early 60s will know some of the main actors. Kaduna Nzeogwu, who led the first coup, General Johnson Aguiyi Ironsi, who was installed as the first military head of state, General Yakubu Gowon, who became the second military head of state after the counter coup in July 1966, and the many others who would later become pivotal in our militarized politics. Emeka Ojukwu, Olusegun Obasanjo, Muhammadu Buhari, Theophilus Danjuma, Benjamin Adekunle, Alani Akinriade, and the list goes on and on. But there were some exceptional soldiers then who stood out as purists in military terms. They were not as known as the more famous soldiers who got involved in politics, but they upheld the fundamental tenets of professional military service and were admired, even revered, by their juniors, colleagues, and superiors. One of them was Brigadier Zakariya Maimalari, who was the first regular combatant in Nigeria. He was an outstanding soldier whose story, unfortunately, was never really told. Well, not until now. Our guest today, Haruna Poloma, a political scientist, peace and development expert, historian, and biographer, is the author of this book titled The First Regular Combatant, Brigadier Zakariya Maimalari. The book is a biographical work on one of the Nigerian Army's most iconic figures who was killed during the first coup. Haruna joined us to review the book and discuss the late military hero. Enjoy this. Haruna Poloma, nice to have you on Channel's Book Club.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
Okay.
Your book, The First Regular Combatant, Brigadier Zakariya Maimalari. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Well, yes. Maimalari.
Maimalari.
Yes.
Okay. Maimalari. A legend, a legendary figure in the Nigerian army. But why did you write this? This is really good for us. We need so much more of this in Nigeria. So I was delighted when I saw a copy of your book.
Thank you very much. The first thing, my primary motivation in writing about the late Brigadier Maimalari was the fact that, one, he was the first Nigerian, indeed the first African, to earn a regular combatant commission in the history of the Nigerian army. All the other officers of that era, beginning from Wellington Bassey, whose army number was N1, down to all the other officers of that era, they joined the army as other ranks, meaning they were non-commissioned officers. They were just sent on a short service, a sort of training in the United Kingdom, and then they were given commissions. So Zakariya Maimalari was the only and the first person to finish secondary school, what we call secondary school today, and then to go to a military academy, the Royal Military Academy in Sandhurst, UK, which was the foremost and still remains one of the foremost military academies in the world. So, you know, he was the first. And to earn what then was known as the Queen's Regular Combatant Commission, because Nigeria was not even independent at the time, mark you. So, you know, he was the first. And I found it depressing, really depressing, that nothing was brought out in our history by so many historians and writers. Instead, we find that a lot of junior officers, very, very junior to him, his boys, people he trained, were the ones that are taking all the glory and the accolades. You know, so I said, what is this? Somebody has to do something, even though I know the culture today is we don't like writing about dead heroes. We're more interested about living presidents, governors, ministers, so that when you launch the book, you know, they will be there and their millionaire friends will be there. But this guy died over half a century ago. And most of his friends and contemporaries are also not alive. So those who were there, for instance, when we did the public presentation of this book, General Gowan was the chairman. He came in person, but General Gowan was his junior in the army. In fact, he never even met him. They went to the same secondary school, but General Gowan never met him in school. So for me, the joy was those who remembered him and who he was came and stood by us and supported us as we tried to present this book to the public. So the wider picture and purpose then is that it's time in Nigeria we begin to look beyond, those who are being glorified. Perhaps because, not that those today who are being celebrated have not done much, but I'm saying that there are others, silent heroes, uncelebrated. And we need to come out and remember that past. And above all, to emulate the values and the traditions and legacies they left behind. If we had done that, perhaps Nigeria would not be in the quagmire that it is in today.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. I think you've summed up how iconic it was. And what you've done here is you went to various contributors. How many?
45.
45.
Excluding General Gowan, who wrote the foreword, personally.
I've been involved in a project like this, and I know that must have been hard, difficult work.
Very,
we had to go to 45 people, get interviews, get them to narrate their opinions and views and experiences with regards to the iconic figure. Now, so they all made contributions here. General Haruna, General Yakubu, Mrs. Yakubu Palm, Colonel William Walby, Major General Joseph Garba, Major General Paul Tafa, Lieutenant General Salihu Ibrahim, Alhaji Aminu Dantata, Colonel Mohammed Mag. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But what they all said, in some ways, were very consistent. He was a disciplinarian. He was a professional soldier, not a political soldier. Exactly. He was iconic. He was a leader that a lot of the younger soldiers saw as a role model, and really inspiring. That must have been for you.
Oh yes, and this is why perhaps also those who are in the military today will take advantage of these disclosures and revelations to recall that this was a tested and respected profession, and there were certain standards by which that profession, even the present president of Nigeria, General Buhari, Muhammad Buhari, is one of the contributors in the book, and you can read what he said. Yeah. So also Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, yeah. So they all spoke about it. He was their boss, So the beauty of it is look at what they said about this man, and also how do we try to emulate to those standards.
The narratives were also very revealing. Yeah. I mean, let's set aside Brigadier Zakariya. Let's set him aside for a minute. The narratives about the coup. He was killed in the 1966 coup.
That is true.
The January 1966 coup.
Exactly.
So the narratives about the coup, the intrigues, there were certain narratives I read here that were revealing.
Indeed.
About what happened around the events of 1966. Was that intentional, or it was just something that...
Well...
Did you probe them to say things about the coup?
Well, for some reason, whenever the name of Zakariya Maimalari pops up in a conversation, you cannot divorce or alienate it from the coup in which he was killed. The reason is because that was the beginning of the politicization of the Nigerian military and the subsequent militarization of the Nigerian polity. In other words, the typical training, especially of Sandhurst officers, is that they must be apolitical. They have no business in interfering with governance. Yeah. But then, around that era, given the Nigerianization policy, the British were about to pull out, and they felt, okay, the officer cadre should have enough Nigerians. So policies were brought where a quick, if you like, a sort of a sort of crash program,
yeah,
to bring in Nigeria,
promotion.
speedy recruitments. So you had the likes of Emmanuel Ifiajuna, Ademwega, and so on. In fact, most of the participants in that first coup were university graduates who had radicalized ideas about revolutions and whatnot, and they found themselves in the military. And those were the ones that spearheaded that coup. And that is why, if you read, for instance, in my book, the account of Colonel Tony Eze. Colonel Tony Eze is late now. He was the first corps commander of the Nigerian Signal Corps of the Army. He took over directly from the British, and he was the first corps commander of the Signal Corps. And he said, after that coup, he was also Sandhurst trained. He said, after the coup, I called Kaduna Nzogu, Chukuma Kaduna Nzogu, and I damned him. He said, forget I'm an Igbo man like him. I damned him. I said to him, you went to Sandhurst. Where did you learn to stage a coup? This is not what we were taught to do. Now, beyond all of that, if you look, the subsequent convulsions and the tragedy that Nigeria has been through was largely because of that military era.
Traceable to
exactly to that. Yeah. So a lot of the regrettable things that Nigeria went through were things that, the long military interventions, coups and counter coups and all of that.
I got the feeling that we probably have not studied the implications of the January 1966 coup well enough.
I agree, sir.
I saw here that General Alani Akinrade, was very pained by how important officers of the Nigerian army were killed during that coup. I mean, when we talk about the coup, we usually talk about how Balewa was killed and how Sardauna was killed and how, the political leaders were killed and so on. But the officers, professionals, the well-respected officers who were killed, there were quite a number of them.
Exactly.
And it changed the army.
And General Akinrade was even pained by the fact that it also destroyed the esprit de corps in the military.
Spirit of unity in the army.
Exactly. Because, in those days, when they travel from one place to another, they don't stay in hotels, so they will go and look, where's the next officer? They are all brothers. He said, we were like brothers. If you travel, you leave your wife and children, she's safe because all your fellow officers will look after her. Anything she needed, they will provide for her. So you had nothing to worry about. If you look at other accounts, where another officer would say, look, senior officers going on course will give me their cars to drive as a junior officer. The case of, he was one of the contributors there, he was a former Minister of Police Affairs. Jemmy Bewon, he's there in the book. He said, one of my senior officers, even his fiancée that he wanted to marry, when he went on course, he told her family that it's only this officer that I allow. You can take out my wife on social. Do you understand that kind of trust?
Yeah.
You leave your girlfriend, knowing that nothing will,
That coup killed it.
It killed all of that.
So there was distrust in the army.
After that.
Tribalism and all those things.
And it permeated beyond the military to characterize the Nigerian polity. And that is some of the things that we are now fighting to reverse or eliminate. Tribalism, nepotism, corruption. Corruption, is not just about stealing money. Moral corruption, professional, those kind of malpractices that permeate the Nigerian society.
Some people have claimed that in Nigerianizing the army, the British were biased towards the north.
Okay.
And Brigadier Zakariya typified that move by the British. What's your take on that?
What I want to stay here...
Is this seen?
No, it's not true.
As that?
It's not true because up to this very moment as we speak, the British Army, up till today, if you are commissioned from the rank and file, you never go beyond the rank of a lieutenant colonel, up till today. Okay. In other words, from Wellington Bassey to all the others who contested for the first GOC of the army, none of them was even qualified. It's only Zakariya Maimalari being a regular combatant.
So it was strictly based on...
It's to merit, strictly. But they didn't even do it. They still gave it to Iran.
I think I'm going to bring you back here. Let's talk some more about it. We'd love to talk about this, but we've run out of time now, and we have to close this. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Congrats on your book.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful.
Nice to have you here.
All right, thank you.
It's the Channels Book Club's Literature Prize Season 4. This year, the winners get a sponsored trip to one of the world's most exciting book events, the 2019 BusherCon Convention, taking place at Dallas, Texas, United States of America. If you're a senior secondary school student in any Nigerian school, get a copy of the novel titled Pelican of the Wilderness by Jacqueline Agwe. Read it, write an essay to review the book, and submit it to Channels Television on or before June the 30th, 2019. For all required information, visit our website or call the numbers on your screen.